Well, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our virtual discussion today. My name is Dr. Trina Shanks. I'm Director of Community Engagement here at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. I use the pronoun she, her, hers. I'm a person with short black hair wearing glasses. I have a navy blue dress with a dark blue blazer. And if you want to have closed captioning, click on CC or show subtitle at the bottom of the screen, and you can activate captions. And if you want to toggle between gallery view or speaker view, if you look in the upper right-hand side, you can choose who you want to see talking during this presentation. But first of all, I'm just excited about our session today. We're going to be talking about the power of interfaith organizing, and we'll be hearing from local interfaith organizers and leaders on their experiences. We have a wonderful panel, and I'm sure you'll be very pleased to hear all the things they have to say. But first of all, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. If you go to the next slide, please. So I take a brief moment to do a land and labor acknowledgement. Engage is very aware, as most of us are, that we function within a society that has a deep history of exploitation, stealing both land and labor that has affected and shaped both Indigenous and Black communities for generations. And we're committed to acknowledging that this is the case and doing everything we can to help create a more inclusive tomorrow. So I will pause for a moment to give you a chance to read this acknowledgement and just to think about where we stand at this moment and where we've come from. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. So this webinar and all the webinars this semester is put on by our Engage team here at the School of Social Work. And so I'd like to introduce you to the team. So we have Sonia Harb, who's Detroit Engagement Strategist, Aisha Ghazi Edwin, who is Engage Program Manager and also Adjunct Lecturer, Fatima Salman, who's also a Program Manager and Adjunct Lecturer. And then we have Blake Newman, who was a field student, but now is working with us part-time before she goes on to her next career opportunity. And then we have Cleo, who's also our current field intern. So thanks to all of you for what you do to make these webinars happen. And with that, I will hand it off to Aisha, and she will moderate our session today.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Aisha Ghazi Edwin, and I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I'm a person with longish black hair, and I'm wearing a blue shirt. I'll be facilitating this session, and a co-facilitator of this session will be Fatima Salman because of her long history in interfaith organizing and a fellow Engaged team member. So to all participants on the session, this is meant to be an interactive conversation. Please feel free to put something in the chat and we will unmute you and allow you to ask a question. So as Dr. Shanks described, this is a special session dedicated to exploring the power of interfaith organizing, and we'll be hearing from local interfaith organizers and leaders about their experience. So we're super excited. So please join me in welcoming our amazing guests. We have Rabbi Alana Alpert, Founding Director of Detroit Jews for Justice and spiritual leader of Congregation Tekiah. We have President of South Asian American Voices for Impact, or SAAVI, and appointed member of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Faith-Based Security Advisory Council, Chandru Acharya. We have longtime interfaith social justice organizer and former executive director of the Michigan Muslim Community Council and current executive director of the Oakland County Democratic Party, Sumaiya Ahmed Sheikh. And we have Lauren Williams, longtime member of the Interfaith Council for Peace and Justice. I'd also like to introduce a special guest that we have with us, Courtney Bushnell, an alumni of the University of Michigan School of Social Work's Jewish Leadership Communal Program, and also member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So she's going to be joining the conversation and panel, and we're excited to hear from all of you. So now I'd like to give you each a few minutes to just briefly introduce yourselves. The questions that you should answer on the slide, if you could state your name, your preferred pronouns, any identifiers to help us make the session more accessible. So just any visual identifiers, and that helps with the transcript. And then your current work in interfaith organizing. So why don't we start with Chandru, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Aisha. Welcome to everybody. And I would like to start with a namaste to each one of you. Namaste in the Hindu faith tradition means everybody is a wonderful creation of the divine. And when I look at you, I see the greatness of the divine and I bow before him. So a namaste to each one of you. My name again is Chandru Acharya. I live in Canton, Michigan, and I've been involved with the interfaith community here in Michigan and in Detroit for the last 10 years. Been a part of the Plymouth Canton ICO, and also I'm a board member of South Asian American Voices for Impact, which is a diversity organization that helps people with civic engagement and tries to serve the underserved communities. So welcome to each one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandru. Alana, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hi, good morning. And I'll say it's actually the holiday of Sukkot, so I'll say Chag Sameach. Happy holiday to any of you who are practicing. I'm Rabbi Alana Alpert. I use she, her. I've got my curly hair up and glasses and a blue shirt. And I'm in my partner's amusing professor study setup. And I'm really honored to have founded Detroit Jews for Justice about 6-7 years ago. Quick story, I think, helps to explain what we do, how we do it, why we do it. Starts back in the day with my growing up in Jewish community, totally immersed in Jewish community, child of Jewish educators, and had this idea, like was encouraged to be a leader. Right. And so thought, oh yeah, great. I'm going to be a rabbi. And then kind of went through a disillusionment period of feeling like, oh, wait a second. The community that I grew up with wasn't being totally honest about a number of things about how power and privilege and oppression works in the world. And so I kind of tried to go my own way for a while, trying to figure out which social justice issue I wanted to dedicate my life to. And I just kept, I figured out that there was not one issue that I could really authentically claim, but that it was really the big picture that I was the most interested in. Why do communities make change? How do we make change? Like, and what are the connections between different justice issues? Those kind of big questions. And it became clear that the place where I could root myself to be able to engage in those big questions was in my faith tradition, and that was a place from which I could be the most of service. That when I asked myself, what can I do to best serve movements for racial and economic justice, I realized I've got to get my people. I got to use what I have, the connections, the shared history, the shared language, and leverage those, offer those towards bringing the people which I have access to into these movements.
Thank you, Alana. And I will say that, I met you through Detroit Equity Action Lab, and I really have always appreciated how intersectional Detroit Jews for Justice work has been. Now looking for, Detroit Disability Power as well. You're always at the forefront and a partner. So thank you so much. Next up, why don't we hear from Sumaiya?
Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. That means peace be upon you. It's a common greeting used within Muslim communities. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. As you heard a little bit before, that I have a lot of work I've worked a lot in the interfaith world, being raised in the Michigan Muslim community specifically. I went to an Islamic school growing up, then went on to kind of a similar story as a rabbi, where I was born in a community where giving back, educating those around me, using the networks and the communities that I grew up in to make sure that people were involved in interfaith justice and interfaith justice work, being able to kind of use that growing up to motivate those around me and encourage others to get involved as well. And so I'm really excited to be doing this work. It's funny because, you know, although I did my bachelor's and master's in teaching, I now work in a totally different way, but I still feel like this is, you know, in teaching in such a way, right? So I know the importance of this work, especially in the day and time that we live in, to make sure that people are working together side by side in harmony despite differences, and just really working with our commonalities. So I'm excited to be here today. If you, I guess I'm identifiers, I'm wearing a yellow dress and have also my study in the background. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sumaiya. Why don't we have Laron up next?
Thank you so much. I hope I'm unmuted. You can hear me, right? Yeah.
We can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be a participant in this panel. I guess I've got several threads that have led me to being here. First, I'll let you know that I use the pronouns he, him, his. And even though that there was a nice photo of me that you used at the beginning, that picture is now about 20 years old. And so I have to let you know I don't have gray hair anymore. Really, I've got white hair, and it's thinning very much on the top. But if you've seen that picture, then you can guess that I'm the same guy. Anyway, threads. I was brought to the work of interfaith organizing because of my involvement with I'll just call it leftist organizing in general. I became involved with some of the workers organizations out of Detroit in the late 1960s. I was attracted by a very, very charismatic figure, Kenneth Cockrell Sr. And that was my, kind of like Alana was pointing out, that opened up the doorway for me. I mean, there were things that I realized I had been told all my life that simply were not true. And so I started to experiment with lots of different leftist organizations. I also started to experiment with various faith-based organizations. I had been raised in a Baptist household, and I was semi-disillusioned with the Baptist religion because I kept encountering so much hypocrisy within the religion. So I started just going to all sorts of religious services and sampling different things and trying to make a decision about which ones I would be involved in. And the thing that I noticed, that the contrast between my political work, the work for social justice that I was doing with leftist organizations, and the faith-based organizations, was that people of faith tended to be kinder, in a word. And I really liked that kindness, that sense that rather than trying to create winners and losers, the objective, the goal seemed to be to advance everybody. Now, I know that that's not 100% true, but in my experience, I felt that a lot more. So I started to become more involved when I had an opportunity to become more involved in an organization whose stated purpose was to bring people together across lines of faith and to also work for social justice. I was immediately drawn to the Interfaith Council because that's the focus of our work. I'll stop there because I don't know how long 3 to 5 minutes is, and I have a tendency to go on too long. So,
okay, that's great. And we hope to dive deeper into some of the issues that you brought up. But thanks so much for sharing. Courtney, do you want to go ahead?
Yes. So my name is Courtney Bushnell. The pronouns I use are she and hers. I am wearing a light blue blouse with brown hair that I'm wearing down. And so as Aisha said, I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I also had the great honor of being a part of the 2021 class of the Jewish Communal Leadership Program. And while I was in the program, I was able to be the intern at the Jewish Federation of Greater Ann Arbor. And while I was there, help create and establish the Jewish Communal Relations Committee there, and which purpose is dedicated to developing relationships with other faith and community groups in the Ann Arbor area. I also, with my cohort of classmates in the Jewish Community Leadership Program, put on for our capstone project in the program an interfaith dialogue and panel as well on interfaith work and interfaith engagement, and with leaders doing this work across the nation. And I feel very honored to be here and excited and to be in this conversation with these incredible people, and very humbled as well. And also very humbled to be here representing the Jewish Communal Leadership Program. So
thanks so much, Courtney. And we'll get more into what the Jewish Communal Leadership Program is at the school as well. So at this time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can all see each other. We're going to spotlight some of our speakers, and that will, I think, just help the flow of conversation. So you guys have all kind of talked a little bit about your history and how you got here. And I'm wondering, why do you think interfaith organizing is important? Why is it powerful? We've talked a little bit about it. But in your experience, why is it a valuable organizing tactic?
Aisha, do you want me to go?
You can go ahead, yeah. Anyone feel free to jump in. You want to raise your hand too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm a first generation immigrant to the United States. I came back about 2 decades ago. And as a member of the minority Hindu community coming into Michigan, wanted to feel accepted. Not only accepted, I wanted people to understand my culture and celebrate who we are. So the beginning of the interfaith journey started with a dialogue. We became a part of the Plymouth Canton Interfaith Community Outreach Group. We started having a dialogue, had started cooperation, small projects that we worked together, winter jacket, food drives, and regular stuff that people do, but with cohesive interfaith groups, and try to understand people and the common goodness and the common humanity that we all share. That was the beginning, and then we slowly started enjoying that stuff that we were doing, and from being polemically tolerated, we started being accepted, and then there was a time the diversity was celebrated, where folks from different faiths came over at Diwali to celebrate Diwali at our place, and we were going out for Christmas or Eid. So that was a beautiful journey, and we started building relations and friends, and made friends that are friends forever. So that's the power of interfaith coalitions.
That's great. So Chandru, so just to reflect back to what you said, it really helps with acculturation, especially if you're an immigrant, helping you really feel like you belong in a community and allowing people to get to know you. That's great. Does anyone else want to jump in here?
I'll just add on to that. I agree. I think in today's day and age, working across religious traditions is probably one of the best ways to build community and advance social justice, right? It's important that people of different religions and cultures really sit down and just start with a conversation, because that's where really understanding begins. Sometimes we really rush to, we really rush to judge, right? It's just common nature, or see, just kind of hearsay what's going on. But once you sit down with people and understand where they're coming from, why they're coming from there, it really begins that journey of understanding. And it's not always intended to be a debate. Sometimes, we can agree to disagree, but that doesn't mean that we can't work towards common goals together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Moran, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I want to add something that a strong component of my involvement with the Interfaith Council lies in the nature of the word faith, of what faith means. So I've heard it described in various ways. Some people say faith is the belief in things unseen, or faith is an act of declaration. I declare that there's a certain reality or a certain truth that I put my faith into, that I believe that certain things are there, that they exist. And it's that act of declaration that I think is very important in doing interfaith work, because we're not entirely or only talking about where we have been in the past or where we are in the present, but we're talking about what we declare to be possible for us, as groups of people coming from different backgrounds, as groups of people whose vision and whose experiences are different. I declare that there's a kind of world that I want to live in. I declare that you're my sister, you're my brother, you're my companion on this planet. And that act of declaration to me is the thing that can overcome many different barriers or perceived barriers. Let me add one more thing, and this is going to take a half a minute, but I'm fortunate and unfortunate enough to have been born during the days when Jim Crow segregation was still the law. The first 15 years of my life were spent with Jim Crow still being the law in the country. And sometimes people ask me, as a person who lived during that time period, you know, and I have some horrible atrocities in my family history that maybe in time I'll go into that, but what has gotten you through or helps you get past those atrocities? What gives you hope? And I always respond that it isn't entirely hope, and please don't misunderstand, I don't want to dismiss the importance of hope or things that can be seen, but the thing that gets me by is the kind of faith that compelled, and I always think about this, that compelled my ancestors who lived in slavery. Let's say the year is 1829, and all around you, every person who looks like you is enslaved. And if you talk to your grandparents, they talk about having lived in slavery. And everything that you can perceive, that you can see, that every bit of evidence tells you this will never, ever, ever end. Then what compelled them was not the evidence of change, but the faith in change, the belief that things would be better and would be different. So it's that kind of faith that compels me today to work with other people, no matter what our circumstances may be. It's an act of declaration.
That's so beautiful. Thank you, Laron. I'll share in response to this question, this moment in my interview for rabbinical school, where the dean said to me, if you want to be a community organizer, right? Why be a rabbi? And the reason that I gave, and one that still works, is strategy and spirit, right? So on the one hand, it makes sense to organize from a Jewishly rooted place or just from a faith rooted place, because we can get stuff done that way, right? Where faith communities are super networked, and right, like all the other things that I said about being able to draw on stuff to bring people together. But also, like, it's not enough that it's just strategic. Not that just as strategic is bad. Strategic is important, right? This work that we're doing is holy. But it also matters that we do this work rooted from faith to sustain us spiritually. So in even the few years that I was out in the field organizing around worker rights issues, I was seeing burnout, hearing about burnout, right? And so since then, I've been trying to figure out, okay, so how can spiritual practice be one of the antidotes that can help us to do this work for the long haul? So I think the way that I experience it, doing our social justice work from a faith-rooted place, both gives us a set of practices that can nourish us and sustain us. I can give a lot of examples of that. And it also gives us perspective, right? It can help us place ourselves in the long arc of history, right? To use the words of Reverend Dr. King. So.
Just
Thank
to
you.
add, yeah.
Go ahead, Chandru.
Yeah, just wanted to add that, for me, when I talk about interfaith, it doesn't necessarily just mean, including people of other faiths. It also includes people of no faith. So if you're truly pluralistic, you have to accept that there might be people, who might not have faith. And for me, they're equal too. They have the right to not have faith, or sometimes faith is transitory. You could have deep faith and then you lose a child, or you lose a dear one, and momentarily you might just reject faith, but faith might come back. So it's good to talk of interfaith from a faith perspective, but true pluralism is when you accept everybody as a part of your family, the whole universe as one family.
That's great. Thank you, Chandru. Courtney, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, and I love everything that was said. And just adding on to what Chandru said, I think something with faith too is, and it's something that Ibo Patel kind of says, who is the founder and director of the Interfaith Youth Corps, is when all faith groups have, when you get down to it, this values and beliefs in doing good and charity and love. And when yes, there's differences between faith groups and communities, but when we come together on those mutual beliefs and values, we can do so much more together than we can ever do apart. And I'm a firm believer in that. And being in JCLP and with, my own faith background, and I came to understand that even deeper, and wanting to go forward and do that in my life and work. So that's something that I would add as well. And also something that I wanted to address too is something that's with your question is the power of interfaith work. And I would say, inner community work and intergroup work is, it allows us to not be limited to the, what I like to call is the media download of understanding of different groups, faith groups, whatever that means, but rather we're not limited to those things that we get from the media or media representations in movies, but we're engaging with each other, we're developing relationships with each other, and we know each other. And so then those biases and stereotypes are challenged and relationships are developed. And when that happens, it's beautiful. And those relationships, I think when friendships are developed and we actually know each other, we're more likely to show up for each other when we're in times of need. And so that's also something that I find powerful about this work.
Yeah. And coalition building, showing that you have like multicultural, diverse coalitions behind you is powerful, right? Powerful to getting a bill passed or pushing an issue. One thing that you all touched on is something that we really try to teach in the School of Social Work around community organizing, which is how do you really organize across political divides or values that are different, or when there's differences, there's identity differences. And one of the things that always seems to really ring true with me especially is you can have political differences, you can have religious differences, you can have experience differences, but if you touch on people's values, then you can really form coalitions and you can really touch on personal reasons to get people involved. And I think that's also what's so powerful about interfaith organizing is it is rooted in values and it's bridging, those commonalities. I think you all touched on that. Fatima, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that Courtney kind of described it, and I was thinking about this as another social work principle, the idea of when you show up for others, you're showing up for yourself also, right? When you're showing up for other communities, marginalized, oppressed communities, that's also you showing up for your own self as well. I know that, I was thinking about this when Aisha and I were talking about this panel, and one thing that always has struck me when I've done my own interfaith organizing is the idea that this constant idea, and especially I think because of the large number of Jewish friends that I have, and Jewish activism that I've done with Jewish counterparts, is this idea that almost like this can only happen in America to a certain extent. I've always felt that way, and I've openly said this in several, interfaith gatherings that, I would show up for my Jewish brother wholeheartedly, and maybe if I was living in another country, I wouldn't be able to even, right? Or maybe I wouldn't have had that relationship with other faith-based traditions. And so I wonder if any of you could comment on that, on the kind of the American experience, and really the greater Detroit experience too, because I do think that that's a hallmark of our state as well.
Does anyone want to jump in on that?
Yeah, well, Fatima, it's a very important point, and working together can actually build bridges. And my personal experience says that in the Plymouth Canton area, irrespective of what the geopolitical or international conflicts are, people from different traditions who are at each other's throats sometimes, internationally, can sit down and work over here, because I think there's just an ecosystem and a platform that allows you to engage without being nasty or without being violent. So that's the greatness of the democracy and the political framework that we have in the United States, where you can approach somebody and talk to them in a very civil manner, and that engaging the other person in a civil manner is the beginning of understanding and building a relationship. So I think you're right. This is a platform, and it's an opportunity. It's a gift.
Yeah, I'll just add to that, because I've done some work in the space as well, is that one, we are blessed, as Fatma said, in this, growing up in the Michigan community at large, the interfaith space is really welcoming and it's really big, and there's many ways that you can get involved. I think the act of interfaith organizing it's a multi-issue, right? So because they're not one track to, how do you organize people? There's not just one track to go there. There's many routes. And so when I said before, like the meeting people where they're at, sometimes you're always talking about how do we get people to the table? How do we bring them to the table? But it's really meeting them where they're at. But whether it's an age thing, where are the youth at? Where are they getting their information from? How do we engage them in that platform? Or where the adults are at, or certain communities are at. So understanding those kind of barriers and understand and finding those issues for the community. So for example, I know we brought up kind of like, we used to, when I worked at the Michigan Muslim Community Council, we had a close relationship with the JCRC. And so rather than always organize around faith, we found what are the issues that are pressing to our communities? What are the issues that our people care about? And one of them, and this is for everyone, this is not just a Muslim or Jewish thing, but it's schools, right? The making sure that our kids have education, making sure they have all the tools and resources they need for that. So one of the things we organized was like a school rebuild, where we continuously went back to some Detroit schools and worked around rebuilding them, and we partnered up with our other local communities, other people who were interested in that type of work, right? So it wasn't always what is a Muslim issue we can rally around, or what is a Christian issue we can rally around. It was like, what is important to all of us here living in the state of Michigan. Another thing was also giving back in times where we're available. So for example, as a Muslim, I don't celebrate Christmas, right? But I know in Michigan, there's many people who do, or many people who can't celebrate it the way they wish to celebrate it. So on Christmas Day, that day is open to me, right? So being able to say, okay, let's, partner up with other communities that can also give back on Christmas, because that is, as a Muslim, that's one of our 5 pillars of our faith, is to give back. So organizing toy drives or helping in that way. So there's kind of many issues that are pressing to the community that you can kind of organize with together. And I think once we have those conversations, or once we continue to have those conversations, those are the things that kind of, when they're brought to the table, then we can meet those people where they're at.
I think that's great. And it touches on, what was one of my next questions, which is how do you organize across political or religious divides, right? So what you're saying, Sumaiya, is like find those common issues. Does anyone else want to jump in here?
In the beginning, I think, when relationships have to be built, you don't talk about the contentious issues, or, you first build faith and trust in each other. And that's been very successful for us locally in the Plymouth Canyon area, is that for the first couple of years, we never talked about faith. We never talked about anything to do with religion. All we talked about is how can we come together and work together, and how can we share meals together. And after a couple of years, the trust came to a certain level when we could openly discuss about issues and conflicts, and those could be resolved in a very peaceful manner.
Alana, not to put you on the spot, but what's your experience with this? I know that some are saying that tactics to use are kind of focused on shared issues or values. In your leadership position, how have you gone about this, and is it different?
Yeah, I don't want to, I don't want to be a downer. Everyone's like being so positive. And I feel like my experience is a little bit different. I mean, when I moved to, I lived on both coasts, and when I moved to Detroit 7 years ago, I was really shocked by what I saw as the gap between the Jewish community and other communities, in particular in the social justice sphere, but in general. So I know sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm like a Yankee, and I'm like imposing my, different cultural standards from other places. But I often remember this experience very early on. So Aisha mentioned that we met because we were both a part of the second class of Detroit Equity Action Lab, which is through Wayne State. And it was not too long after I moved to Detroit, and the application was like way closed. Like it was like a month overdue or something. And I had heard about it last minute, and I reached out, and they were immediately reached back and said, and I said to them in the interview, I said, why, the application's late. Like, why are you guys, being so willing to do this? And they, kind of honestly said, you're the only Jewish person that applied. So I guess while I feel like there might be some, kind of good stuff happening in the service realm, in the dialogue realm, when it comes to like the kind of work that I want to be doing, kind of more systemic change, I see a lot of room to grow, a lot of room to grow there.
An honest answer. Anyone else?
Jack.
What was that?
Laron's back. I'm like,
oh, Laron's back.
tell us something hopeful, Laron, or not.
Laron, did you get a chance to hear this question? We were just asking about, how do you kind of bridge divides if there's conflict with other faiths or there's political issues?
I did have a chance. Oh. Wait just a minute. Can you all hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, I did have a chance to hear the question. I had a bit of misfortune, so I have a setup here that has a computer that's balanced on books. And in the process of changing the battery, the computer fell to the floor, pieces of it broke off. I have been trying to put the pieces back on while I've been listening through the computer, through which I can still hear things. And so give me about 3 more minutes and I'll be able to talk and you can see me and everything will be set up. I think though that I didn't get to see who mentioned the thing about being a downer. Please don't worry about that. It's important to reflect what your truth is and to share it in a sharing circle. So I'm happy that you mentioned that. It's not a downer, and I believe that much of what you raised has been addressed. People have already talked about how in organizing with others, you don't necessarily have to organize. That there are many, let me just say this, there are lots and lots of ways to organize around the food you share or something that excites you, or there are just so many avenues and possibilities for becoming organized that don't necessarily show up in the room where organizing is happening, right? You can continue to talk with and get together with people around things that don't even seem to be related to the major issues that you're trying to follow. I make my living as a professional storyteller, and I constantly am talking about issues of social justice through storytelling in ways that people don't even realize are happening. You know, they're just thinking, oh, that's a cute story, or that's nice to hear, but they're also hearing a social justice message. And then they invite me over to their houses for dinner, or they invite me to come to their school, or they invite me for this, or they invite me for that. And that's part of the process of organizing as well, not just in the established setups for that. So let me get back to fixing this thing and I'll be back with you in a second. I'm sorry, but thank you.
No, that's okay. I think that you just shared something really important, that, you know, stories, they are really one of the critical tactics that we use in organizing, right? Because without kind of saying it explicitly, you're sharing your values. So you can tell a whole story, like Alana just did, about applying to deal and then realizing that she was the only Jewish applicant, and how it really hits on her values of, she thinks that people of her faith, other faiths really need to get more involved.
Can I give a positive story too, though, now?
Go for it.
So it was a couple of years ago, a call went out from a national Jewish organization saying that for this upcoming Jewish holiday, it's funny to call it a holiday, it's our mourning holiday. It's a grief holiday in August called Tisha B'Av. And that Jews should, draw on this framework, use this opportunity to come together to protest just a million things having to do with ICE, right? And someone's going to have to ICE immigration, customs enforcement, right? Yeah. And so we, so the first thing that we did was look around and see, like, what were the local targets where we could actually, right? We weren't going to protest for the sake of protest, which is a mistake that faith communities make often. But we found a target. We learned that the police department in the city of Dearborn had a contract with ICE that had all sorts of terrible implications for the community. So I reached out to my friend and colleague, Imam Dawood Walid from CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, did I get that right? And said, hey, there's this, do you know about this issue? He says, yes, we've been concerned about this for a long time. I said, do you want to do something together? So we organized a demonstration. And, again, kind of drawing on a lot of the rituals and teaching from that particular holiday. And I think, you get a Jewish group and the Muslim group to do something like this in front of the police station, and 3 Congress people came. Okay.
Wow.
So like, again, we have to talk about power, right? I'm not sure that's a word that we've actually named yet. Right.
Mhm.
But when we came together like that, we were able to leverage our power to get our Congress people to show up. And basically over the course of a week, a few other, actions helped to kind of, I'm not sure what the right metaphor is, chip away. But a week after the demonstration, the city council decided not to renew the contract with ICE.
Wow.
That was an incredible win and a very clear demonstration about how when we have a base that is organized by faith, right? When we're able to turn out our own folks, A, and then B, to bring those folks together towards a common goal, we can do amazing things.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Like each of our communities have power, but together. Lauren, go ahead.
I want to go back to something also that Chandru introduced, and the question around the difficulty of trying to create sort of interfaith organizing in other countries, and the bit about the United States presenting a particular kind of opportunity for that, and how difficult it might be elsewhere, and all that is true. But it's kind of like many other things, it's both and all the time, in the sense that this country presents a tremendous opportunity for organizing across all sorts of lines of diversity simply because of who's here. There's so many people from various backgrounds here. So that's the opportunity. The challenge is then to get past those same barriers, to learn the lessons that we might normally unselfconsciously learn, so that we can share those lessons with other people. And let me see if I can give a kind of an example. So my wife is Japanese. She's a Japanese national, not Japanese American, from the island. And so we have had to struggle to work out things that if she were even an American, the relationship would have had a kind of a shared context that our relationship doesn't have. And she also often has talked to me about Japan being a country wherein there is a context culture, which is to say that a certain look or a certain movement has an understanding across the entire island, because that movement is understood within the context of the culture that is a shared culture. I hope I'm making sense. That resounds with me, because that's also kind of a part of my experience as an African American, especially growing up during the years of segregation. There were certain shared cultural ways of doing things that I can just say a word or give a certain look, and I know that I'm understood within that context. High context culture. But the United States in general is low context culture, because there are so many different ways, languages and so on, even age differences, different cultures associated with age, that we don't all share. So we have had to develop, not all of us have been good at this, but we're under a situation where we're forced to become self-aware and other-aware, to be able to share those things that come from the low context culture, or from our personal high context culture, which isn't shared by another culture. So what I'm trying to say in all of this is that we have a great opportunity to transcend our personal culture and learn how to share it with other cultures, that we then can share with cultures in other countries, the connections that we have with other countries, or the connections we have with the countries and the cultures that created the culture that we live with, right? That there's a background culture to just about every other culture here, unless you're an indigenous person. And so you can have a connection through food or through dance or through language or through lots of different ways that you can teach them how to share with other people.
I love that. About creating a common language, right?
Mm-hmm. Could I also add something onto this question? And I love that, Laurent, as well, and everything else that has been shared on this. I mean, come down to it. I mean, this work is challenging. I mean, and there are differences between different faith groups and communities that make it challenging. But I just would add that kind of on what Chandru was saying is when we come together with those mutually held goals and develop relationships, develop trust, we're able to develop and build empathy and understanding for one another and our differences, even if we don't agree. And I think that's something that is beautiful that can come from this work and when we engage with each other. I also would add on to that when we do engage in this and, and we come to understand each other, build these relationships, and even with our differences, we also find the differences that allow us to bring something different and beautiful to the table. Each of us brings something different in this work because of our differences. And that is a beautiful aspect of it. And I also would just end with this by saying, when we do engage in it and build those relationships, then we can learn from each other and learn from our differences and what we bring to the table and grow and learn from each other. And that's something that I definitely, being in the Jewish Communal Leadership Program, wow, did I learn so much from being there and my Jewish peers in that program. So that's what I wanted to add onto that question.
Can I ask, Courtney, so you are not Jewish, right? You're not a practicing Jewish person. You decided to join it. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to join the program?
Yeah, I definitely can. So it's kind of a long story, so I'll try to keep it short. So basically, during my undergrad, I had the opportunity to study abroad in Jerusalem, and I lived in Jerusalem for 4 months. And during that time, I studied the 3 major religions there of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And I was born and raised in Utah, Salt Lake City, and spent my life there. And it was the first time I really had left my own community and opened my eyes to the beauty and diversity of different beliefs and people. And I loved it. And it planted a seed that started there, that fast forward, I declared in there my degree or my undergrad in sociology, which then led me to the Master's of Social Work. And once I was in the program, I watched this seminar in Jerusalem between leaders in my faith and Jewish leaders in Israel. And they were talking about engaging with each other and developing relationships. And the next day I went on the social work website. And because of that, I was drawn to this Jewish Communal Leadership Program. And I was like, wow, I saw the work that they were doing and I immediately applied. And that's how it happened. So that's what brought me to JCLP and kind of the background that got me into this work and my passion for it.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Does anyone else want to jump in on this question?
Yeah, actually, I just want to add something to what the speakers have just spoken. One of the things that I have realized is the expansion of social capital that happens when you work in an interfaith kind of an ecosystem. Let me give you an example. During the COVID times, we, as an organization, SAAVI decided that we should probably create some community care packages and serve the underserved communities because people were really hit bad. They couldn't get sanitizers, masks were short supply, food was short. So we started and we had a target of 100 community care packages that we were supposed to deliver. So within our faith group, we started with about 30, 40, and then we jumped to about 100 packages. And when I shared this with my interfaith group, Everybody pitched in. And eventually, over a period of 3 months, we were able to deliver about 1,100 packages. We had masks being created by the Interfaith group. We had the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints donating us food that came from Farmington. We had the Muslim community, giving us jackets, and we were going to Ann Arbor, Flint, and various areas to reach out to people. So I think there's a certain amount of expansion of social capital and network that happens when you work together, and organically good things happen in an expanded form.
Thanks so much, Chandru.
Aisha, Trina asked a question in the chat.
Fatima, do you want to ask it? I can't see the chat.
Yeah, I can read it out. Yep. So Trina has asked that, is this interfaith work something most commit to for a lifetime, or do most people come and go based on the activities and opportunities in the moment?
I can answer that a little bit. I don't think it's mutually exclusive, right? As I brought up before, sometimes this can be a part of people's faith, but I think this is just a part of humanity, really, right? To give back, to work together, to want to respect and learn about one another. It's usually the common good of, what everyone wants to do. I think activities and opportunities and social justice issues that come along the way are definitely great opportunities for people to kind of jump in and get involved and do direct action. But as we all talked about, interfaith is really rooted in dialogue, and that doesn't happen overnight, right? I think it was Chandru who earlier in the conversation talked about how, in the beginning, I think you were speaking to your experiences here in Michigan, but in the beginning, it wasn't like, hey, we were just best friends and we just started we could have like those hard conversations right away, but it was really like building on that relationship, learning about one another, maybe even meeting each other where you're at. So inviting people over to your homes and, to the mosque or to the synagogue or wherever it is, and then really going into some of those more deep rooted conversations. So I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think that it's always going to be a learning curve. But I do think, as someone who now, like, I do a lot of political organizing work, sitting as an ED as for the Oakland County Democratic Party. And I feel like my go-to when it comes to organizing or even getting out, getting people to go out and vote for whoever they want, is really going back into their communities and doing that interfaith work with networking, building those relationships. Really, if I want to, if an election is coming up and I want people to get out the vote, the first people that are some of my go-tos are like the clergy of, telling them, hey, can you tell, your congregation that, we have this coming up, and educating about this. So really kind of using those networks. The education will always continue, and the activities are great, and there always will be coming. Hopefully we'll get to a place where we're not always rallying around so many social justice issues that are concerning for communities, hopefully, but I think that's definitely a movement that folks can always get involved in.
I'm going to pipe in and ask the question, Aisha, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So, based on, again, just previous organizing, I want to bring up a kind of very real topic, in the sense of, when leaders of faith-based organizations are doing this work, typically what I've noticed is people within your own communities are not 100% on board. They're like, oh yeah, like, that's great, you're doing it with, X community or Z community, but we're not going to do it. That's not, how do you kind of straddle that? Like, your community wants a certain thing and may not be at that point where you're at in terms of understanding what social justice is and collaboration is, but you as a leader having to also work towards collaboration and working together.
Yeah, Fatima, that's always a challenge. When you, most of our interfaith meetings don't have more than 8 to 10 people attending from our community, or likewise from the other communities, because there is, there are prejudices that we carry from back home. If looking at most immigrants have some prejudice or the other that they carry. And the unlearning of those prejudices, takes time. So I would say it's work in progress. You have to work for a sustained period of time for more participation. It does not come naturally. And I understand that that's one of the biggest challenges that we have to overcome, is to how to convince your own community about the power of interfaith work. And that dialogue is the only answer.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Sure,
Alana, I think you're.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think that the Jewish community doesn't need to be convinced to do interfaith work, but it's towards what end? And I think sometimes I feel like we operate on kind of outdated or more narrow models of community relations, as opposed to co-liberation, right? So are we building a coalition so that if a policy, if a policy that we don't like, then we can call you, and you'll, step up for us? Is that the goal? Is that why we're building these relationships? So that I can call you? Or are we building these relationships because we're to support me, as opposed to us focusing on what are the things that we all need? Does that make sense? I don't want to get into specifics, but you can imagine this, there are conflicts between those two models.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are we actually just almost tokenizing each other? And
the kind of utilitarian,
right.
Or what's it called? when we kind of back and forth, there's a word for that.
Yeah.
I scratch your back, you scratch mine, or
reciprocal.
Well, that's a good way of saying it. That sounds nicer than transactional. Transactional.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of faith-based advocacy organizations from almost every faith only talk about their faith members being the victims. That's the challenge, right? So the worldview of a faith-based organization generally comes from a standpoint that I'm going to advocate for people of my faith, and the power of interfaith and the true power of faith is, don't look at the faith, but you look at the problem or the issue and try to address the issue and for the common good. And that is the biggest challenge. We have to dilute some of the faith-based advocacy work, which talks from a standpoint of just my faith members, and try to see who are the victims. And sometimes you might have to criticize your own if you are in the wrong. So that requires courage. But I think the interfaith movement can give you that strength. And if you have more people that collaborate, we can reach that point.
I think this has always been a area of interest for me, because I think Chandru knows, and some people may know, half of my family is Hindu and half of my family is Muslim. And then I'm also married to someone who's Christian. And I've seen a lot of that conflict, a lot of what Chandru was talking about, both sides kind of talking about being victims. And whenever that sort of dialogue happened, it would just exacerbate the conflict. Because when we really started to get to conversations about our values and how they're the same, that, it's easier to live with each other. I don't know if anyone else wants to share.
I would just add one thought on this. Just the thing that came to my head is with interfaith organizing, when we start this work, you're not going to have everyone showing up at first, but when anyone engages in it, it's an invitation to others, because others people see that. And then as we continue engaging it, that invitation is still extended. And I think that's when more people come to the work. Carla Goldman, the director of the Jewish Communal Leadership Program, something that I love and that she says is just leadership, like true leaders are inviting other people to be leaders. And so as we engage in this work, yes, there's going to be people that maybe at first don't want to engage in it, but we're, as leaders in this, extending that invitation for them also to take that hand, join the work, and be leaders in it too.
Yes, I'll say also that I think sometimes people in our community are proud that those of us who are leaders can go out and represent them. But I think that's a very narrow and not especially effective model of faith-based organizing, right? Like, is to like get, we used to call it rent a caller when we were organizing, like for a rally. Like, it's just like call a pastor, you know, to come and say a blessing. And it's like, I try to make it a rule, like never to go anywhere alone. Like that it's nice that I can go around and represent Detroit Jews for Justice and whatever, and represent the Jewish community. But like, unless I am engaging and inviting in folks in the Jewish community into the process, into the larger, into the movement work, then I think that I'm not doing my job.
I'll also add that in the end, I think it's really important to prioritize impact for your future, right? So working with your allies and focusing on shifting that culture, whether it's within your community or within other communities, but really spend some time doing that because it's important to build bridges internally, but it's also really important to focus on who you can help moving forward. As a mom of boys, our twin boys, everything I do really, my mind has totally shifted towards how can I make, you know, Michigan or America a better place for them? And a lot of that is rooted in this interfaith work. How can I make sure when they go to school, they don't face the challenges that I have to face, or they don't have to make some of the choices that I may have to have made. And I hope that, moments like this, speaking to others on the call like this, really gives me that hope that these dialogues are happening, these conversations are happening. And I hope we can really build that relationship to make sure that our faith or our culture is also moving in that direction.
That's great. Thanks, Sumaiya. I'd like to open it up for some question and answer for the audience. Are there any kind of last words anyone would like to say? Laurent, do you want to jump in or?
Well, quickly, I'll just say thank you to everybody who's responded to that last question. And I'll just add, you know, again, I'm probably the oldest person here, hard for me to believe, but it's true. But some things just take time, you know. I forget who it was that referred to Dr. King's statement about the arc of the moral universe. That was the quote: "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." And you know, sometimes I think, how does he know? You know, he doesn't know. I mean, the arc of the moral universe could be so long that in the long run, it bends toward horrible evil and cruelty. That could be, you know, it's just Dr. King's tiny slice of observation within his lifetime that causes him to say that it could bend toward justice. Or it could be what I said earlier, which is he's just making an active declaration, you know? And that's what every little tiny bit of interfaith work that I do is my declaration in the belief, in the faith that we, no matter what our backgrounds are, we can create a world that is better and that works for all of us. So it may take time for me to sit down to dinner with my cousin and my nephew and my, you know, the guy down the street and the guy who fixes my car, and all those things are pieces of this whole process. So I just want to help people to see that you can keep that in mind. Yeah, we may want things to change in a week or a month or whatever, but it's invest your energy even without evidence that it's going to work. It's just a decision. There was another thing I wanted to mention, and it had to do with another question, but I'm not remembering it now, so it's okay.
Well, feel
It'll come
free to
back to
jump
me when I'm not trying to think of it.
Yeah, feel free to jump in whenever. So I want to turn it over to the audience. If there's any questions, feel free to put it in the chat. Fatima, I can't see the chat, so if you could just let me know if we have anything.
Well, actually, right now there's nothing. I don't know if Trina, if you have anything that you want to add. Also,
Nothing to add. Just thank you, everyone, for being honest and open and being willing to share. I'm hoping that if students or anyone who's on this webinar who looks at it in the future are interested, if they want to reach out to some of you all, maybe to follow up, if you're willing or open to that, that might be something that happens in the near future.
You asked a really good question. I'm just going to pose it. I think it's so. I sometimes wonder if interfaith work isn't in fact easier than coalition building inside a particular religion. Any reflections here? What a great question.
I guess I can speak to one of my experiences. I think, although that a lot of my interfaith work stems from working within the Muslim community and things that arise from that, I think there's a lot of allies that you don't realize, right? And I'll give a really quick example of when the Muslim ban rallies when the Muslim ban happened. Seems like it was just, ages ago. But the first thing when I heard about it, and when others around me heard about it, I would have thought that maybe the first thing I would have done was reach out to a bunch of like fancy organizations that do this work and say, let's get the ball rolling. But really, I reached out to some of my close friends, and one of them is on this call, Fatima, and we thought, how do we galvanize around this? How do we do this work? And really, it was like the power of the allies in the organizing world that helped build that movement. In less than, I think it was, and you can speak to this, less than 24 hours, we had over 10,000 people at DTW that were standing up for, the Muslim community. And they may not have even known what exactly was going on, but they knew that this was impacting the Muslim community at large, and that they had to be there to stand up against, the hate and the violence that was stemming from that. And we had more, and I can't remember the exact numbers at the top of my head, but I will say that we had more allies there than even the Muslim community in general, right? It was the others that came out for us that were non-Muslim that really helped empower that movement and help bring light to that. And just some of the people that we talked to that were there were just like, we're here for you. Tell us what we can do. We want to make sure that that you have other people that are standing up with you. So I guess back to that question, I'll just say that I think to have that hope and to know that moving forward that sometimes you can be siloed to your community or think that those are the only people that will help build you or only people who will help make movements go farther. But I think in the work that a lot of us do, it's always others that are there or people from other background or allies that really help advance this work.
That's such a powerful example. Thanks, Sumaiya. Anyone else?
I know there's another question too that Alana's answering in the chat as well.
Oh.
It's about how do you suggest secular non-religious people get involved with interfaith coalitions to advocate for broader social reform? So you can answer any of those questions. We still have Trevor's, and then we have Emma's question as well.
So the question Fatima was, how do we get involved? How do secular
non-religious people get involved with interfaith coalitions specifically to advocate for broader social reform?
Most interfaith groups will be very welcoming to people who don't have faith or who are secular. So I think that the challenge is not there. If you look at most of the interfaith groups that I know of in Detroit area in Michigan, they're very accepting. You have to make an effort, call them, and they will be welcoming. We do have some folks in the Plymouth Canton area who do not belong to any faith. They might be, and a couple of them are atheists, and then they're very progressive people, and they're very comfortable. We work on shared values, shared issues, which are which everybody gets impacted by. I don't see that as a challenge.
I agree. And I'll just add, Aisha, if you can go over to the slide that I added. There's so many interfaith groups out there, but some of the ones that stand out to me for different reasons. One is ING, if you are looking to really just get, some resources and education around Islamic network groups and, what goes into our Islamic interfaith work. Organizing a general group here in Michigan, Interfaith Leadership Council. They do some wonderful programming. One of my favorite ones is called the Religious Diversity Journeys, where they actually have like high school and college students, I believe, visit different faith-based places or non-faith-based places and learn from those experiences. And the third one I brought up, not just because I think it's the only one, but I think Sisterhood of Salam Shalom does a really good job of understanding what relationship building is. It's not so much about, I think Alana said it earlier about, you scratch my back, I scratch yours, or I come to your event and you come to mine, but it's more about like, let's just, it's 5 or 7 women sitting down and enjoying food, talking about what's going on in their lives and how it all relates. So I think they're one group that does a good job of that, and I'm sure there's more like that, but those are kind of 3 that stuck out to me that may be of interest of some people on this call.
Thank you so much, Sumaiya, for those resources. So we are unfortunately out of time. I want to thank you all so much for sharing your amazing work. We send out an email to all participants with resources. So if you'd like to share anything with the participants about your organization or your contact information, please send it to me and I'll pass it along. With that being said, these virtual discussions are available on our website, and this one will be posted to YouTube and on our website as well. We will go ahead and send this link in the chat. You can take these sessions for field credit. And our next virtual discussion is happening October 7th after Proposal P, Detroit's Continued Fight for Social Justice. And we'll send the RSVP for that in the chat as well. So I want to thank you. Sorry about that. I want to thank you all for joining. This was a great discussion. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Wow.
Have a good afternoon, everyone. Great conversation.